breath.
So welcome everyone to Reflect on Improve Own Professional Practice, CHCPRP003. This is session 3, and this is where we're going to be wrapping up the looking at evaluating our practices for the future, making plans for self-advancement, and also making sure that we're checking in on our duty of care policies and procedures for the industry as well, but also going through some assessments at the end as well. All righty. So I'll just do acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nations people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Just remembering anything that's a trigger warning, making sure that you're learning to regulate your emotions, reaching out for support, and and making sure that you're looking after yourself as well. So self-help resources here for you, for yourself, for people that you're working with, helping build up your own resource list for when you're out in the future working as well. And just a reminder that if you need any sort of task assistance, we have 3 learning support officers that are there available and for support, and that is on lso@hayderinstitute.edu.au. And there's the self-book link here for Calendly for role plays or for task work. Welcome, Bron.
Hi, thanks.
Just a reminder about role plays and setting up those requirements. Make sure that you start showing your ID, hold it up, say your name, make sure it's in view enough. You can see how it's hard to quite to see. So you sort of got to make sure that you get it probably close enough back to, it's about 10 centimeters from my chin, and you can probably see it quite clearly. And to explain what your office setting looks like as well. If you're having difficulties with the office setting, reach out to Learning Support. We can help you set that backing up for you in Zoom or WebEx, or showing you where you can blur your background. It's important to do that because some role plays, people are in their living rooms and there's all different sorts of things in a living room, and it doesn't lend itself to showing what a simulated workplace is. So if you've got an area in your house that looks more like an office, that's better with a plain wall or something. But just remember, if you're doing role plays, a couple of things that have come up of notice is of what people are wearing. So just getting out of the pool and having a sarong on is not appropriate. Just be aware of what you're dressed in when you're doing the role plays and where you're actually doing them in the household. So if you're doing them at home, blur that background or put a picture up to show the stimulated workplace, please. All righty. So tonight we're looking at how do we evaluate that feedback, especially for ourselves in the industry around our progression, and what improvements can we make for ourselves that's going to often benefit the organisation as well as colleagues and your participants or clients that you're working with. evaluative feedback is quite interesting in that to be able to take from that positives, because not everything is positive in the sense, oh, you're doing great, it's all working well, that's all great. But when you get constructive feedback, which might say, look, we really think you might need to slow down when you're talking, or that we notice that you're not keeping eye contact or things like that. And there are only small things that people will bring up as constructive feedback, but it's how we let that affect us or not. If you're looking at it purely as words to improve on, very good, because, okay, I'll remember that one. Thank you for that, for letting me know. If you take it personally, which we did have a discussion with some other learners, and it was quite interesting how, depending on where that person is, whether they let that in or take it as constructive feedback and that they can make changes is that. So it's all about improving our skills for the future and future-proofing us in that sense as well. In all our workplaces, want to remind everybody around our ethical considerations and legal considerations. So every time we talk about a legal situation, that is a privacy, an act or a piece of legislation that guides our work in the industry. So for mental health, we could have the Victorian Mental Health and Wellbeing Act 2022. We could have the Mental Health Act 2014. They're all guidelines on how we legally work. It tells us what we can and can't do, what our processes are, what our practice should look like, because that comes under your duty of care as well. But the ethical part is tricky. And people often go, well, what are the ethical issues that come up? And especially around privacy and confidentiality. In a workplace, when you've got your computer open and you're working on case notes, and if you're in a shared office area and you get up to go out the room, really important, for you to close that monitor for a start. Minimize the client notes area that you're working in. Some organizations have password codes, and they'll take you out of the system within 30 seconds of not touching it, and you have to recode back in. Other people have organizations have different processes of getting into work. So if you leave your work idle, it will often shut down itself. But we've got to be aware of the ethical issues that we could have in the workplace with other people coming into the office and looking at our computer screens. And I don't think we talk about it enough around that being an ethical issue. And somebody can see over your shoulder and what you're working on. If you're aware you're working on something confidential, have only half a page open, minimize it down to half a page. It's less visual if somebody's come into the room. It's one of the things I found ethical problems with in sharing joint office areas, that the information that we'd often be working off, and you can be working and really intent into it, and you're doing case notes and typing in, and you're not aware of people are coming behind you, and they might start talking to you, and you've got all this information up there. So something to be really aware of. The other ethical issues is around not putting files away that have hard case note copies, not putting them away properly. Then we're breaking confidentiality. And if anything's disclosed out of that file, that's actually a breach there as well. So there's all these ethical issues that we can get into. There's ethical issues, and I think it's some of the role plays in other tasks, other modules we do around that ethical talking around about clients and naming too much that identifies somebody and not being aware that your conversation could be overheard. So if you're at a luncheon and you're discussing a case and you might be using people's names, but for somebody who's in that group and mightn't be totally aware, but they might be able to put two and two together, you're breaching confidentiality. So we don't have those conversations. You have the appropriate conversations at work in a controlled environment. So it would be in an office setting. It would be where privacy and confidentiality is aware. So you could be just in a one-on-one area. But think about those things because ethical considerations come up around small individual things about sharing information between workers. So being very aware that if somebody has said, I don't want my information and my identity to be shared with anybody in the organisation. So what would one thing you be able to do to ensure that their identity was kept private on their case notes? What would you do? So their name is not to be identified. You still need to be able to identify the case notes and who they belong with. What's one thing you can put in play, Bron?
I put my clients down as a letter instead. So in my phone and stuff like that, they're just under the like a letter instead, or client A, B, C, or D.
Right. Yep. Okay. That sounds all right. Sarah?
You could also give them a number, a reference number.
Yes. And a client ID will actually be something that the organization can consume in their confidentiality files as well. So that will link anything to do with that ID number with the information inputted under that ID number, which is often important to make sure that all that information stays together. Many reasons why somebody wants their identity kept private, and that is part of what we have to do legally if that's requested. Ethically, if we don't, we're breaching that. And if we put down that client's name, we have breached that. We have not followed the legal requirement that somebody's asked us to follow. They could be under a new identity program. They could have many reasons why they don't want tracking of information. This is where it's also important to remind people that when they're signing forms, especially around health forms, there's a little box that says, do you want your medical or health information kept in My Health Guide in online? Now, if you don't tick that little box no, all that medical records from x-rays, blood tests, all those sort of things, that can go up on your My Health record. And that can actually be accessed. So think about what you want and do not want shared and look over your forms. But for us in working in the industry, ensuring that we followed those procedures, we don't have to have the client give us too many reasons why they want their information kept confidential. They don't have to explain to us. Often they will want you to know, but for you to know when they've said, I want to keep that information, use an ID number, your organisation also might have a different type of coding for that as well. Sarah?
I don't know whether it's the same thing, but I know my hospital records, because of the whole experience I've had, they asked me whether, like, got written down the only people that are allowed to, if they call, they're allowed to give details to, even as far as tell them I'm at the hospital. So I've only got, I think, my sister and my friend. They're the only two. If they call, everyone else, they just say, sorry, we haven't got that patient here. So is that something you can do as well?
Oh, totally. Yeah, because you think about, so put it in the instance of if somebody was in respite with you in care and the family called to check in on it. So the auntie's calling to see how her nephew's going with care at the moment. They've been in hospital and now they've moved over to respite care. I just want to check in on them. You can't give that information. And what is hard is explaining to them that there's policies and procedures that you must follow for the organisation to not share that information. And I'm sorry at this moment of time that I cannot give you that information, but we do take seriously the privacy of all our participants. Now, you haven't said if that person is there or not, but that's our duty of care. So that's our legal responsibility. The ethical part here is, and it feels quite tricky sometimes in that you want to support the family knowing about their loved ones. They have every right then to make a request to head office to be able to come in and see the person if they want to. So they might already have in place things that they've said, I don't want any visitors. I don't want you to give out my information. You must follow that to the T. Ron?
Can I? Oh, sorry. You go
So
first,
I
Gwen.
know myself, I've been trying to set up a bank account, just not quite sure what I want to do, and it's not that easy. I went to our bank and I just said, listen, I just want my own account. I don't want anyone having access. They couldn't do it because it'll just come up with my name. So I went to two other banks and I ended up at one, and I've signed up and everything that I asked for, no emails, no text messages, all of that's all happened. And they've sent the card to the home address, which I said, please, can I have pick up from the bank?
Yeah. And
The bank.
and once it's gone into the system,
Yeah.
out into the ether, it's forgotten. But that is a complaint process that they breach confidentiality.
Yeah.
For sure. And this is where you've got to find out what your organisation does around privacy and confidentiality for clients' notes and case management and information. Every organisation will have a policy in place. They all must adhere to the Privacy Act of 1988 or 1998? Everybody must adhere to that across the board, across Australia. There are then different acts in each state and territory around confidentiality and privacy. You have to make sure that you're following those as well as what your organisation. So it's three-tiered. So it's national, organizational, and then it could be the work practices that you have to adhere to. So onboarding is very important when you start a new organization as well, to find out about what legally considerations that you have to have. But the ethical side is in the grey, and the ethical is about actions. And this is why we need to consider and you'll see a lot in your questions, in your assessments. What are the legal and ethical requirements of somebody with their duty of care? So the legal part is adhering to the duty of care in the Mental Health Act 2014 due to following work actions, blah, blah, blah. The ethical situations is that if we do not follow that, we breach and cause a problem around information leaking. We haven't recorded information and stored it in the right place. We've shared something inadvertently. They're all breaches. If we haven't done what we should be doing, that's a total breach of practice. And there's your ethical issues around that as well. Have we told the client their rights around confidentiality as well? Interesting one there, because a lot of people get told, do you understand that your files will be kept safe? How? Sarah?
Going back to allocating a number, will only certain people have access to that number to identify? Like if it's your client, would you only be able to have access to that particular client and its number? Or
Two
is
things
there a
here.
pardon?
It's a good question. It's a good question because two things can play out depending on the organization. So one that I worked with around the sexual assault team, a lot of ID numbers were used for people accessing the service, and I think there's no more reason why I need to say why they needed identity private. So in that we had code numbers. You were assigned somebody that you were working with. So you were their case manager, counselor, line manager, support person, whatever you're under the code. And then your supervisor above you has also access to that. If somebody needed to work with that person, they have to go straight to the supervisor. They couldn't access that code because there would be codes to get in. But depending on the computer system you have for privacy, we used to have to dock in and get a code number to go and access the files. And when you time out, you have to go and get another one. And that also happened in housing, in the Department of Housing in Queensland with what we call SHIP and QUIP, and they were Queensland housing platforms that held the data of all people who were looking for housing in all areas. So all the housing organisations would put up what they have availability for in their districts, and other organisations were able to go on and go, oh, look, there's one that they're available here, over there. I'm going to put a recommendation in for my clients to be able to access that house and see if it's available, and then put in a referral. The referral then might have an ID number for that person, and then they come back, well, where's their name? And no, it's confidentiality here. You know, we're not working. Privacy is paramount here. And then the questions might be that, are there other reasons due to that? So then we can't leak that information as well. So it's really ethically, we could have said, well, look, due to domestic violence, such and such code number needs to have kept their identification private. I've just breached my responsibilities here by doing that. And even though organizations will want to know, have a reason why they're using a code, other organizations are very clear about understanding why that. So it depends on the training of organizations and depending on how the system's set up. But often too, the case manager, and the centre manager are the only ones that can get into certain files. So remembering how we have to store things, how we take assessments. And when we're doing assessment work and the information you're getting told, we have to ensure that we're doing that in a private place as well, because ethically, if we were in earshot of somebody else in the area, just say we were in a community centre in a meeting room, but there was different areas where people could sit. If we were sharing information that was confidential and other people were using the room, we're breaching it straight away. So there's all these things to consider. But because the Australian government has the Privacy Act that protects the right of information of all individuals, it's the regulator on how an organisation should manage that information. So making sure that you understand what informed consent is with an organisation, and each organisation will have consents in plans, going by their guidelines of what their confidentiality is about. Sarah?
I've just had a random thought. I know when you go to hospital and they've got all your notes from however many times you've been in hospital, they've got them in actual paper form, and anyone can actually see them because they send the wardies off to collect them, and the receptionists have them there on their desk for whichever clinic you go to. And it's really not very private and confidential, is it? Because, I mean, I understand why it might have to happen because, but
Yeah,
it really isn't.
and it's tricky, and it's the same with the mental health field.
Yeah.
Having visits to a mental health unit, and somebody might have been, if you're court ordered as well, there are a lot of other people that see that file, but they're all under the presumption that it's handled with confidentiality and care. It just seems probably that a file is sitting there on a desk that's somebody's name on it, especially in medical, which a team is probably working on. It's how the trust that confidentiality is kept for that person. If people know what's going on with that person, it's still not something that's talked about unless it's in a medical conversation that they're having. There's the expectations for that to happen, but yes, I can see how medically information can be more visual at times. Tricky situations.
Yeah, because that's how my mental health care records got released, and they weren't meant to.
And let's hope that they've got these things tightened up now in the system, in that too many breaches were being made. And being able to ensure that you have your right to request anonymity. So being anonymous is asking for a client number, not using your name. We have a duty of care. We have standards that we must adhere to of how we work with participants and clients. When we're working in the mental health field, in a community setting, government setting, wherever you're working, you have a duty of care with a number of factors here. And this is where, you're first of all following the directions of your employer, and that your actions, you're acting in a reasonable manner. So understanding the behavioral expectations of how you are to act. So working with respect, being inclusive, ensuring that when you're speaking to somebody else, that you're understanding about confidentiality and you're not giving away information. If you need a debrief around a certain colleague, a certain client, you would go to your supervisor and you might be talking more in code around client A has now committed to having therapy, blah, 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 blah. There's issues around transport. What can we put in place for them? So you're not breaching that confidentiality. If you say that person's name, we've got to be aware that if we're allowed to say that when they want that anonymity. So beware of their rights. Beware of rights of the individual when they come into a service. And knowing your duties as per your job description and understanding what your scope is of how and what you do in that organisation is really important as well. If they're going to change your duties, it needs to be in writing, because then they must be following the legal procedures here for changing your scope of service. Because if you're working for an organisation, you're under their insurance. So if they change your role, it needs to be in writing as well. These are all the little ethical issues that often organisations change a role and they haven't put it in practice. And here's your new time, here's your new roster, this is what we're working on with such and such clients. And it's not in writing around the scope of what you can do. They're in breach. The organisation is in breach as well. But this is where our ethical conduct happens. This is our actions. This is what we take into play around when we're in a workplace. We talk about being professional and following policies and procedures. Are you actually doing that? Have you actually read the policy and procedures of the organisation? Have you just skimmed over the front page? Because in the details of what their expectations are of you will be quite itimised. Are you following the code of ethics? Now, often they take you through when you're doing an intake into a new organisation, the code of ethics training that you might go through. It could be an hour to 2 hours training that they take you through, and you'll get a certificate, code of ethics completed, because they have to ensure your conduct is in a professional manner, which is also about your relationships with colleagues, clients, students, student placements, because professional boundaries are set in place for a reason. And this is where the code of ethics and the ethical issues, I think one of the assessments talked about a person being on a board of aged care management. And one of the board members had a father who needed aged care urgently. And that person got in contact with the organisation and said, have a space for my parent, please, now, due to their position. Big time ethical issue here. They've jumped over the waiting line they've taken on the complete responsibility that they could decide what happens in that organisation. They haven't followed procedures, company procedures. So it then becomes an ethical breach. So that person can actually lose their job because they've made a breach, a decision to go over what was in front of them in writing. So even board members of organisations, they do not have the privilege to be able to step over that process of that client management. That it could be an intake process. Think about, we have to set boundaries for ourselves. Can we accept gifts? Different organisations will have their own policies on that. And ethically, what can we accept? So there's quite a few discussions around if flowers or chocolates are sent. I know quite a few organisations, even if it's for one person, they'll accept it on the behalf of the organisation. If it's something quite as a personal gift, some organisations set a limit of what you can purchase. So anything $50 and under, you do not have to declare. Anything $50 and over, you must declare. Because often people might bring you a small Christmas card with a candy cane, things like that. But some organisations have amounts. Others are strictly, if you get given something, you must let your supervisor know. And others set a limit. But also, when somebody celebrates the work that somebody's done for them, a lot of organisations look at it holistically, and it's more than one person that's done the work overall. So they like to celebrate as a team. Bron?
What's your personal opinion on it for gifts and stuff?
It's so tricky because, and it's different I've been in the teaching area where the gifts from the children, they come in, they're so, I've got something for you, miss, but then when you see it's competitive with the parents around what they're buying, that's sad. So some schools will actually set limits. If you are buying an end of year gift, think about it being something to share in the room with everybody. So people then brought in cookies and things like that they all made from home, right? So we tried to turn it into, and then those things would be then shared with a luncheon, that type of thing. You can have a card going to the teacher and you can talk about your learning that year. But the gifts that some people buy are, they get out of hand in the education department for a start. Then there's the assumption that they're their friend.
Or their favourite, yeah.
Now, in counselling, community services, you will have people who are regulars. But it's still the professional boundary. Hi, how you going, Evan? Great to see you. How's your week been? That's great. You're social, you're respectful, you're pleasant. If they say, I need to talk to you, okay, is this something that's private conversation? Yes, it is. I have a problem. Then you can go in and work with them on that. But it's still, if somebody invited you to an event, you have to say, look, I'm sure the event's going to be wonderful, but because I am your case manager, we can't accept invitations like that. But I do hope you have a great time, and do come and tell us about it when it's been on. So we have to try and keep those boundaries, because often especially in counselling, which can go on for quite a long time, depending on what you're getting counsel for and support. You're seeing somebody from anywhere from 3 months to years. So they become somebody that you totally trust. And the information shared, but also the perspective of somebody's cognitive ability, because I trust that somebody so much, they must be my best friend. So we have to always reassure that person as your counsellor, as your case manager, as your support worker. You know, I'm really glad you thought of me, but I have boundaries, have to go by.
I'd sort of set like a $10 limit, and then like for their birthdays or something, same, I'll just give them a box of chocolates or something. And in the Turkish community, they find it really rude if you don't take what they give you. And even though I've tried to explain it, one girl had a full breakdown over it, and I've gone, oh, it's a box of chocolates, whatever. It got too hard.
And this is where you have to talk to your organisation.
Yeah.
These are, because that's ethical issues around culture. And how do we navigate that so that we're respectful, but they also need to know the boundaries around what we can and can't have. It's quite interesting. We used to have an old farmer down the road from the service that we were in, women's service, and he used to bring in lemons and bring in a whole big bucket of lemons every 2 weeks. And they were always put on the staff table, please take me, that sort of thing. And to thank him at the end of the year, they put on a luncheon and invited him. So they didn't buy a gift, but everybody brought out, they made something with the products that he'd donated. So lemon butter, lemon curd, there was choco pickles and things like that, that people got
I
invented.
like it. Yeah.
But we all presented back to, and it was a community centre. It was actual a health centre that we're in. So we got inventive, and some of the groups who were attending the centre were the ones who actually cooked the products. So then those products were then taken to other organisations to share as well. So as food bank and things like that. So you can be very inventive, but organisations will have something in place, but very much around professional boundaries, I think, are tricky in that complacency can get set in quite easily with somebody that you're built a rapport with and feel comfortable and feel that you can share information. And having a coffee together, what's the shame of having a coffee together? But if you have the coffee in the office where you're working, I'll just get us a coffee whilst we work on your case management plan. It's not saying we're having a coffee together because we've got a coffee date. You know, so you have to be careful of how people interpret that.
Yeah,
Sarah?
and I found that.
Sorry, Bron.
Sorry, no, I found that as well. And then she actually asked me to put down extra hours as an independent support worker if I bought her stuff. I went, yeah, nah. So then we sat down again with the contract and went through everything. And I said, if it happens again, I'm going to report you to NDIS, but I have written documents and I will be notifying the psychologist of it too.
Sometimes you just have to be stricter with the guidelines to ensure their safety and yours.
Yeah,
for sure. Sarah?
I think the Queensland Education Department, I think their limit is $100 because we've run into a problem before we, like graduation, everyone put in some money to buy their teacher a present and she couldn't accept it because we'd all put the money into one pot.
Yeah.
She could have it. Whereas if actually given her the money separately, she would have been able to take it. And then she did say to us, mate, well, she said to me at some point, she said, I've got no idea where that money went. It was taken off me, but where it went is a mystery. So yeah, it's a bit
You would
odd.
hope that it's gone into a fund to support younger people who haven't got uniforms, like it could have gone into a staff fund because
You
I've
hope so.
actually, yeah, well, I would hope so too. But yes, even so, the giving of money is not ethically that a parent doing that. It's not ethical.
We didn't buy didn't give her money. We bought a gift,
Yeah,
but the value of that gift was
yeah,
greater than, because there was heaps of us
$100.
that put, I think we all put $10 in, but there was a lot of us.
Yeah,
So, and bought
yeah.
her a gift, and yeah.
I think
So,
the one thing that they do talk about is gift cards and what the amount should be, that sort of thing. But still, in the end, it's driven by a monetary amount, which can be an ethical problem. So the gift giving has to be more thought of the thought that counts than education is quite tricky area because they've got set boundaries for each state and territory around what you can spend as well as gifting. Look, we had people who were gifting teachers tickets to the Grand Prix. I mean,
wow.
that's big money down the Gold Coast, getting tickets like that. Somebody was in the organization, but it then become quite competitive that they agreed to those tickets actually being put up as a raffle for the P&C to then, organize, but an ethical dilemma because the teacher wanted to go.
Not surprised.
And I got given them, so quite tricky. I remember when we had a famous, I can't say his name, but we had quite a famous football coach coming to the school as a mentor, and he brought two of his players from a very public team, and they brought gifts to share with the students, like toys and things with signatures on it and things like that. And they actually made the offer of invite to an event with, so many free passes. The dilemma it caused amongst staff wanting to be that person who got in to this event that actually we ended up, we said, look, thank you for the offer, but no, because it was too many people putting their hand up. Well, just because we're not in that group, how come we can't have that access? So many ethical issues and things you have to consider. The one you don't want to overstep is sharing that responsibility of your role turning into a confidant for someone that sees you more than their support person in no matter what you're getting. And that's why we have that ethical code of practice in play to support our work.
I often get a food box, and when I get it, it comes, you don't know what you're getting, but it can sometimes come with so many apples, you're not gonna be able to eat them before they go off and things like that. So I gave quite a lot of it to my support worker, so she took it to give to clients.
Yeah. And you're resharing the resource. Yeah, that's ethical practice here. That's very ethical practice in resharing that resource. And that worker could have taken it home and used it for themselves. But ethically, they shared it with other people in need. It's the same as we used to always get at the community centre so many loaves of bread a week and milk. And they would take a bottle of milk for the workers, coffee, and then the other bottles should be put in the fridge for people, parents with children to start with first. And then it went down the line around, adults and things like that. But how many workers you saw taking a loaf of bread or a bottle of milk or, oh, this is going to go off. I'm going to take it. I had one worker that I worked with because I said, how big are their pockets? And she looked at me and she says, what do you mean? I said, well, there goes the bread and milk we're going to take to one of the clients we're doing an in-home support session. She says, what do you mean? I said, well, the bag that you had there with the bread is gone. So she went back and got it, came back, explained that it was for a participant that we were working with. But we had to then talk to everybody there that that's not what this stock is for. If you were doing in-home visits, you'd take the bread and the milk with you for someone, If it was left over on a Friday afternoon, nobody was going to use it over the weekend. It was going to be out of stock there and then, and no clients were coming through the door, then yes, you could use. Because ethically, nobody was going to use it, it was going to go to waste. But we had to get to those points, there's so many ethical things that we have to consider, and we have to make sure that we follow our workplace health and safety practices. And like, once again, they vary from state to territory right across Australia. And it's interesting where certain industries, their requirements for health and safety per state and territory change dramatically. And some of them have very old systems in place as well. Mandatory reporting even comes down to the difference in between states and territories around who the reporter is and what you must report. Whereas we know it has to be around the lotted areas around abuse, sexual abuse, physical violence, all the different types of abuse that can happen. Some states say if a child is at harm, that's it. In territory, it's quite different around you report everything. And knowing your reporting responsibilities for your state's really important, and understanding discrimination and what legislation is in play in your organisation that you're working in regard to discrimination, and how it ensures that the worker is protected in day-to-day functions within the workplace, the work performance, the things that they do, always working by anti-discrimination laws. But discrimination can also be determined in very different ways by certain people as well, and feel like they're discriminated against because they've been left out and not having an inclusive practice. This is where organisations are very clear around the guidelines of what everyone must follow and adhere to across the nation and per state. When we get information, the types of information we would use around research, policies, changes in industry developments, all these things change all the time around what's changing in the differences in the mental health sector for workers. What new things have they brought in place to set the standards up? and for you as a worker to be able to review that information on any sort of industry developments, and doing it regularly will keep you up to date with understanding that what we call a trend across a sector. And often there'll be trends of information around how you're dealing with client demands as well. And organizations will often join professional networks. So we've talked about that in the past around being part of a professional association to keep your skills up to date, but keeping up with peak bodies, as they call them, in the industry, certainly with psychological, cognitive abilities, belief, practices, especially around the mental health, community services, peak bodies that identify certain changes in industries and what the worker is expected to do, what the organisation is expected to do. It's something that we also have to keep researching on and improving ourselves over time as well. And think about what professional association could you join for extra information and ongoing PD. So let's just spend 5 minutes. We're just going to press pause. I just want everybody to individually research, come back with an organisation that you should be able to have join as a professional worker out in the mental health field, and one that is going to give you ongoing information in the industry. So it could be around podcasts and webinars, and that you might get a certificate for attendance for new knowledge. So it's all about a professional network here. So I'm just going to press pause here. So what sort of network have we discovered that you could use as professional development? So I'm going to, Sarah, what have you found?
The Black Dog Institute runs free webinars, and so does the Anxiety and Depression Association and the Research Institute. But I am actually doing it's a free webinar, and it's on solution focused therapy.
Right.
I'm doing that this week. And I think if you do the webinar and then they'll send you like a quiz or whatever at the end. And if you do all of that, you do get a certificate.
Yep. So free evidence-based webinars and online learning modules, health professional resources and education unit, mental health in practice, so electronic, online. So training, they have different areas for training, online learning that you can go to, resources for you to be guided by, networks that you can join, health professional networks, access to webinars, and mental practice, that's that online digital health. So quite a useful resource to keep your skills up to date in the industry. Lisa, what did you find?
I put in that thing that you said. I'm a little bit trying to still catch up. Sorry, I'm late. My son had tennis.
All right.
But I found with the Mental Health Professionals Network, I came across this thing called the Signs of Life Psychology. And they seem to have, I don't know if they're connected with the Mental Health Professionals Network or if they're their own, but they've got resources and network meetings and podcasts and webinars as well.
And I mean, you can do all this at home. You can do this at work, because often some organizations give you time per fortnight to do professional development. So you could be sitting in an office sharing a webinar with a couple of your colleagues, and you can all do it together. So, but it's good to know where to go and do it, because it keeps you more up to date with what's going on in the industry. Sarah?
My sons both got diagnosed for the autism down in Brisbane. It's called a clinic called the Minds and Hearts Institute. And because we're associated with it, they send emails all the time and webinars that you can attend. So I suppose if you are linked into various services, they will probably provide you information on what they've got coming up too. And
Yes.
the more
Yes.
services that your service is linked into, the more things you will be.
Yes, very much so, because it's ongoing education for the clients. And no, it's a good way for organizations to be able to share information as well. Joven, what did you find?
I've got here a mental health professional, it's online development program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can do it online. Yeah. So they're giving you a learning about this one.
So training,
Training, yes.
yep. Resources.
Resources, micro learning website and partnerships.
Yep.
They have also research and innovation. That's it.
Yeah, so it sounds, we've got some good resources happening out there that we can share, that we can all tap in to find out what's going on in the industry. Do a Google search.
Yeah.
What's going on in mental health today in Australia? You'll be surprised what comes up. But change the wording. What are the trends in mental health? And if you change that, if somebody can now do that Google search for me, what are the trends in mental health in Australia? And when you change the wording, up will come a different perspective and a view on something totally different that we mightn't think about. And what have we come up with?
Do you mean when I've put that in, it just says the rates of mental illness are growing at a faster rate in younger people than among adults?
Yeah, so that's a trend
Yeah.
that's happening. Yeah. So that's one trend.
For me here, Australian overall mental health remains the same, though with some increases in people feeling happier and more connected. That's the
It
trend that I
also
get.
says there's an increase in Australians seeking professional help. So maybe that's why people are feeling happier, because they're getting help.
Because you've got to look at the trend, think about post-pandemic and the rate of mental health that's still coming out seeking support from that. And that was more youth-based. The ongoing long-term damage for a trend that showed up was the young people. Is the trend around therapies You know, what are the trends in mental health therapy? Change that, the wording, have a look at it, see what it comes up with. Then you can know when people are talking about it, what it relates to. It's all good information to have as a worker in the industry, for sure. Sarah?
Is it also because mental health and talking about mental health is becoming more normalized? It's more acceptable, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for.
I would totally hope so. And it is something that it is more normalized now, that we can talk about mental health as part of our overall health system, because they always kept physical and mental health so separate. They never treated the whole system as a holistic approach. Jovan?
I think it's right now when the talk about mental health is more normalized because people are more educated when it comes to mental health illness compared to before, and people accept that mental health illness is very dangerous in
Yes.
nowadays.
And it's quite interesting because across the board, across Australia, across all different cultures, we have all different beliefs as well around mental health. But that is starting to change, because learning that somebody should have the rights to support and health because of mental health, the brain is a huge organ in the body, you know, it's part of the body, the physical system. And when that's more explained, it seems to be more acceptable that the behaviors from mental health is what people are judging, not what's going on for that person. So I think we're having more insight. You are correct, Jovan, more insight into what mental health means for your overall well-being, for sure. And now they've already linked the nutrition and the exercise to it, that when you put the three together, that holistic approach, they actually complement each other and actually make a much better way forward, quicker improvements for people's health when you include physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. All righty, let's leave it there for a break. It's 7:15. I'm just going to press pause. All right, welcome back. And I just wanted to quickly go over, we were talking about PD, professional development, and being in a network and collaborating and finding new sources, what's going on with trends in the industry. I think it's also to think about too, for us as workers, staying competitive in our field, because if we want to get different roles, how are we improving our skills that we might need a new skill set for in a different role? Is the organisation changing the clientele that you're bringing in, participants? So that's another consideration, because NDIS now is a big part of services adapting to the needs of clients. So now it's, you know, certainly more regulated and identified around the areas of support. The organisation you could be working in could be changing their industry output by changing the clientele that's coming in to the service. But also remember too, mental health has been changing in the last few years quite quickly. And the funding that's coming in from the government, the identified need areas of communities are changing all the time. So we need to stay up with understanding what's going on in our community, in our working area, in our state, in the country. So continuous professional development is a way to keep that credibility up that you have as well. So something that you might have trained in 15 years ago will certainly have different aspects now. So updating our skills, making sure that we're meeting the demand of the skill set that is required in the industry. That's another consideration. And for us to be able to get indemnity insurances as well, we have to stay accredited as well. But for us as well, what the benefits we're getting from it, like it helps give us a bigger scope for the roles that we would be suitable for. And when you're building your skills, you're understanding new strategies and approaches to meeting specific needs of clients in a specific sector. But that can then be broken up and be seen as quite broad across the sector in all different ways. So for you to widen your own experiences is around having that extra training, and an hour's podcast or webinar where you're sitting and taking in information is one of the easier ways to do it. But we also would really like for you to be able to do that reflective work as well. Because as part of your professional development, the use of how you're reflecting on what you're doing, what's the purpose of it? And that's quite a good question sometimes you might feel overworked or tired or pulled from left to right. What am I doing? What's the purpose of this? What are my insights into the industry and where I'm heading? Can I change things? Can I move things around? Can I, asking yourself, how do I feel about it? Question. Because that'll change week to week, depends on what's happened in your working week. But for any changes like that, if you keep calendar event diary entry types, even in dot point, if something happened that week that was a real change for you or a challenge or a win, put it down into your calendar. Have a look at it. If you keep a personalized one on your phone, it's good to put in little things that come up. If you're taking a notebook and you've got notes and you put in something on that day, when you go back and reflect over, where am I now? What have I done that helped change that perspective? It's good to go back over and have a look at where something significant might have happened. You learned something or something changed for your thinking here that you thought, I really want to develop something different, or I had a win today and it was by doing this. Good to go over those practices, and sometimes when you want to ask yourself, what am I doing here? Going back over and having a look at your work is a way to go, I do make a difference. And what can I take away from that experience? Was it something that really upset the balance, your equilibrium? Did it upset your focus? Was it a great win? Was it a great outcome that you had for someone? Was it something that the organization's changing and saying, look, it's all for the better, but we're going to make these changes? And sometimes it's hard to adapt to that. But we've got to be fluid, as we call it. So how do you take that? What do you take away from that experience until you feel more comfortable with the change? So change happens all the time. And sometimes that can be difficult change. And other times we can go, okay, so let's give that a go and see how it goes. But then what do you take away from that experience? And how is that making your work with your people that you're supporting? What has it made a difference to me? What have I got from that? What can I take away for my future on that as well? Good questions to ask sometimes when at different levels of times throughout your working life, because sometimes some work's frustrating. You have frustrating days, let's be honest. You have other days you go, gosh, that was good today. You know, I could see where we had the wins for the participants. They actually were, you know, like moving and changing towards their goals, and you can see the significant difference it's having for them. Huge wins in organizations when colleagues are really supportive of each other and stepping up and keeping each other's back, you know, great wins there. Think about how, you know, if we've done a debrief or we've been involved in an incident, you know, taking notes, just your own case notes, a couple of little dot points. And when you go back and reflect on that, how does that look? And a big question to ask, why did it happen? That's an interesting one. When something happened that actually disrupted that regulation that you had in your working life, was it an improvement? Did it give you other skills to handle it? Good things to ask yourselves now and then. So let's start talking about assessment 2. And this is a topic of research that you're going to be deciding upon what you want to find out that could be a particular interest of yours. So they're saying here, there's a couple of suggestions here for you. I'll just put that in brighter color for you. All right, so this is a topic of research out of your interest area. But what's emerging in the community services industry, what's happening in the mental health industry, trends, as we call it. So you can choose a particular area. Here's a couple that they've suggested. They're not something you have to do. The rising cost of health community services, ICE epidemic, focus on reducing domestic violence, counter-terrorism response, aging population. It could even be around ethical work practices. It could be around the ethical social work for environmental practices. So we're thinking about all the gas emissions and things that they're all trying to change. That's actually part of the sector, community services sector as well. You could be looking at anywhere between what are the new developments in mental health for young people under a certain age, information on emerging development for children who are in out-of-home care. What are the developments for youth in society? What are the developments around managing public mental health systems? Any sort of area that can give you can produce enough resources for you to gather information on. So a community area that's having some change. We talk about the cost of housing, what the cost of housing in certain states has changed so much around how the cost of rental happens to how much private and government funding houses are being built. There's another area. What's an emerging development in the community services around food shortages? They actually had on the news 2 nights ago that a major food bank had run out of food in South Australia. And it's one of their biggest food banks. So something is really going on. And we know that, we talk about the cost of living, the cost of expenses of living, of resources that we use, electricity, water, rents, internet, phone, gas. All these are on top of the cost of food economy in the community sectors. Pick something that will be able to help you find political action. So in what's in that sector that is an interest area, what political action is being taken? So having a research area is something that's quite discussed about in society today, would be a help, because research will then lead to that more often, because you're trying to find the main points of an emerging issue here. So if it was around homelessness, is it around, can you look at homelessness and define that down? Youth homelessness, family homelessness, homelessness for people 70 and over, or break it down into certain areas to define that link more. And what are the emerging issues happening? What are the social issues relating to this topic? So think about how you're researching that area. Make sure it's an area of interest for you. So then you'll want to research more a little bit deeply and be able to explore that a little bit more. So has anybody started task 2? Okay, what would be an interest area of yours in current and emerging development in community services in the mental health field?
I think you know what mine would be.
Lisa?
I was thinking of doing housing affordability. And I think it's a big one, important.
And you're going to get the data on it. And you're going to get the research scope.
Yeah, there'll
So
be
you
a
go-
lot of information on it.
Yes, so this is where you're picking an area that will have to, you need to contain it maybe, because there will be a lot. So there's actually, what's it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let me see, 6, 7, 6 areas of interest that you're developing on this report. So what are the main points of the emerging issue? What political action is being taken? what are the social issues relating to this topic? So housing, what are the social issues that are happening? If you go down into each state around housing inaffordability, how many people are living in vans who are parked in certain streets at night, and people complaining about them clogging up the streets, but where do they go to park? When the camping grounds are full, the public areas for parking close by 10 o'clock at night, so you can't park out overnight. Where do you go that's safe? How will you continue to keep up to date with developments in this topic? Great, we're already working on that tonight. Always, talking about those professional networks that we can be aligned with, and training and podcasts and listening to up-to-date news and newsletters and things like that. Online, social media, what's going on. And how will you ensure you review the developments in this topic on a regular basis? And that goes in line with how you'll keep up to date. How often will you check in for this information? So some of the areas here will have more wording than others. So the areas around the main points of the emerging issue, political action being taken, the social issues relating to the topic. How do you think this issue will affect your experience as a community service worker? And how will you continue to keep up to date? So those 4 top ones will take up a lot more wording on how you will continue to keep up to date. In the structure of your report, there's 5, the areas are all in the task itself. You don't have to do a separate Word document if you don't want. You can go and put the information into each area in your task, and you can do it in dot point form as well. You want to do a written paragraph, or you might want a main sentence and then some dot points underneath it, making sure that your information is directly showing how the impacts are, making sure that you're meeting those areas of issues. So just per se, Lisa, what political action is being taken around housing affordability in Australia?
I seen today in Victoria, one of the members of Parliament has outlined what she plans to do. The Premier in Victoria, I think it was, and where she's going to build around train stations, but not just do it in the city. She's going to build in the suburbs and then out in the rural areas as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was the Premier of Tasmania, was it?
Victoria.
Victoria.
But there's a big stink up because a lot of people are saying that she's going to build towers like around the train station, but she's saying that she's building it in a pyramid style.
Oh,
She
yeah.
didn't say those words, but that's what I gathered from how she described it.
This is what the news report says. High-rise apartments to soar above Melbourne's inner suburbs. A plan to create 50 new activity zones to help deliver more than 30,000 additional homes by 2051.
Oh, that's a long time away.
2051. Okay. How we need this quicker action.
Yeah.
And I know, that it'll start in stages for sure. But if you looked at how many people are on the public housing list in Victoria, and in January 2024, there were 120,000 people.
Wow.
Now, that was January.
Yeah.
We're now close to November. So 9 months away. And it's interesting that at the moment, came June, there was an extra 50,732 applicants for people seeking Victorian housing to be put on the register, on top of the 120,000 in January.
Crazy.
So if that houses, so we're up to 170,000, Victoria. In thinking about that, what, so 10,000 affordable social homes are supposed to be under construction now. And they've been fast-tracked for development in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
But they're targeting 10 areas to be built up to have more than 60,000 more homes. So they have got things started. But how long is that wait going to be for priority housing? Now, if you're on the high list of priority housing, you might be lucky within 12 months.
Yeah.
But what do you do for 12 months? If you can't get a private rental, I know where my daughter's living, her house was 480 a week. The house next door's come up for 640 a week. It's exactly the same house.
Mm.
She signed her contract earlier than, so now she's fearful of what's going to happen when that contract finishes, of course. And like so many people getting caught up, do I try and find the $200 a week to stay here because at least it's a roof over my head? Where am I going to find something for the same amount of money? And that's the problem. So there's another issue in top of the issue of housing, rental affordability, and what the government are not doing to put a ceiling on it, even though they talked about putting a 12% and only once a year raise. It's not regulated enough. It's not mandated. So this is where you can start to pick out the issues, excuse me, around affordability and public housing rent. So in the market in Victoria, the market rent for the property, 25% of their gross household income with whatever is lower. Now, if you're talking about 25% of somebody's income, whereas most private rentals do 30%, public housing are looking at taking 25% of somebody's income, a quarter of that income. If you're already a low earner, you can see where the issues are all impacting one another, because if you're a family with children and you would get other government supports for children, but then the cost of education is actually not free. You still pay fees per year, even in public schools, you pay fees. And it's roughly between $200 and $250. You've still got to get the uniform they want for the child to go to school. You think about the book pack list they put out. If you go and buy them yourself separately, they don't mind you doing that, but it costs a lot less. But already the cost of education is already there, excursion costs. So all these things impact a family. What if you need medical attention? Luckily, health care in Victoria is free for children. Is healthcare in Queensland free for children to go to a GP, Sarah?
Most doctors do bulk bill, but not all of them.
No, okay, because I know children are free in Victoria.
Certainly not. Say if you go on a Saturday morning, if you need
Oh,
a doctor
no,
Saturday morning, yeah, they wouldn't bulk bill.
Mm. Outside of those hours. But even so, what if the parent's ill? So unless you can find a bulk billing GP, you're paying anywhere between $70 and $110 for a session with a GP. And you've got to have that up front. So then trying to take that out of an income that's already lost 25% because they're on already low income, and then something medical comes up. So these are the trends that are happening for people. Trends around food for many older people are foregoing certain meals throughout the day and only using what they can get that week. And if they don't have a resource, they're just going without.
We
A
are
few
better
older
than
people.
America.
Sorry?
We are a lot lucky. We are a lot luckier than in America, though,
Oh, yeah.
because at
Yeah.
least we do. If you have to go to hospital, to a public hospital, it's free, and yeah.
We have emergency care here that's, you know, generally such a high level of support. If you're waiting for surgery and you're renting and you can't work, and that affects the rent. So you can see all these trends start to happen. So that's what we're trying to pick out. So there's different topics you might need to rein it in on, but housing can take, we've just discussed housing in so many different ways. You can pick up one of those trends and go with it and find enough information. So think of picking a topic that will have more developments that you see come up in the news, social media, finding out what's happening in research. So when you're researching, don't look for things 10 years old. That's not what's happening now. We want the 2023, 2024 time frame of what's going on in your research. So make sure, sometimes put the year in as well to do the search. And think about the biggest one here for me is, how do you think this issue will affect your experience as a worker? So how is that homelessness affordability constraints for so many people, how is that going to affect the social outcomes for people? And how will then that affect your work? So what would you need to be considering as a worker to take on board and understand what these changes mean for our society? So what some things would you consider that homelessness will affect the people you work with? What else will be coming out from that?
Stress and anxiety issues.
Yes, yes. Affecting people's mental health, trauma-informed practice. Think about that. the trauma of that actually happening on top of something that's already traumatized somebody that they could be living with. But it's the stress, it's the development of mental health illnesses due to trying to cope with the impacts of it. This is how it's affecting people's lives, will then come back over into the work sector where we're working. So then what should we be more aware of? Do we need more training in trauma-informed practices? Do we need to be, well, there's one instance for upskilling with trauma-informed care. Look at the effects of domestic violence and homelessness. Already we have to be so aware of that when we're talking about homelessness, when we're working in the sector. Because we have to consider that people might have left somewhere that could have been a part of the reason why they're homeless. Because there's certainly not enough safe places for parents with children. And I say parents. So whether it's either partner with the child, there's still a shortage. So how do you think that'll affect your work? And understanding that people will have a lot more stress and medical issues, like that stress can cause blood pressure problems, which in turn cause other hypertensions in the body, which then makes it very hard to process information. So then what do we need to be as workers? Need to be able to understand how that's going to affect our work. So our approach here is going to change. Our approach in how we're stepping in and supporting people is going to change. And what will those considerations be? And we all know for the last 3 years, 4 years, trauma-informed practice is very an emerging trend that's included in all different types of assessments. They've even got, that sounds terrible. I saw it on Southern Cross University last night, where they have training for trauma-informed practice for GPs. So, and I know that practice has been out there for a little while, but they're trying to bring it in that all doctors are trained in understanding the trauma-informed framework of practice and working with somebody and what to consider and what lies underneath different things that are invisible. Anybody that's doing anything sort of medical, dental, physiotherapists, or in the allied health sector, everybody's considering what these changes for people means around having a trauma-informed practice and understanding, because you've got to watch the dialogue as well. So these factors that if we're talking about an aging population that has the what's happening for the changes for the worker, is it around cognitive abilities and the processing of information where people need people to be their advocates? And some people take advantage of that. And sadly, some families take advantage of that as well. And you as a worker can be affected by that. So there's all these issues that you can find. There's benefits as well to how it supports the worker as well. So, so it says, think of the issues that will affect your experience as a worker. Well, that can be a good effect as well. How would it be if you're working in the homelessness sector and finally be able to get affordable housing and put a roof over somebody's head. And you've been working with this client for 6 to 12 months. And finally, you've been able to get a house, sign them up, do all the paperwork. I mean, it's a game changer when you see their faces, when you've actually said, sign the contract here. Do you understand what you're signing? You're now linked in with Centrelink for your rent payments, because Centrelink take care of those co-payments. If they have a Centrelink payment, if they're working, they have the rent drawn straight away. That's in certain organisations, in housing organisations. So the budget's worked out. They have weekly supports come into the home. But the relief to not have to ask somebody else, can I sleep in your garage? Can I have my car in your driveway? Can I couch surf? Can I borrow the showers and the toilets? Can I put a tent out the back? A lot of people are in camper vans still. A lot of homes who are now developing little cabins out the back as a granny flats, but it's not so much as a community welfare, it's a moneymaker. So what are the trends happening here? Has anybody got any ideas of what they will do besides Lisa?
Something on domestic violence.
Are you going to go specific what the emerging issue is?
Probably about, because it's all becoming legal now, about the coercive control. So probably something about that, because I actually was talking to Women's Legal recently, and they said because of the changes recently in the laws, if I had gone to court now, I would have got primary care of my kids, just checking them out. But because I went to court 7 years ago, everything was different. Yeah. So that wasn't possible. So like how much that has changed over recent years.
Yeah.
That kind of direction.
Now, straight off the bat, I've put in emerging issues of coercive control housing. And up comes a paper on responding to coercive control and the housing needs, and what's coming out around the demand that people are trying to coerce organisations into having that housing for people. So let me just bring it up. So they're talking about the criminalisation of coercive control and the accountability of coercive control with housing and re-traumatising people. So here's a whole new trend happening in that sector. So take a line of interest and open it up. But try and probably, because DV is another big area, like say define it and bring it down so you have a more understanding. And then how is coercive control in the new laws going to affect your experience as a worker? So that's why I'm saying have an interest area that you can really unpack and be able to get some research for. Any questions on that? So these are the areas that we're talking about. The areas, what are the main points of the emerging issue? Now, under each section in your task, if you want to do dot points, have a leading sentence or two into the dot points to put the person in the picture to that area. So what are the main points of the emerging issues? One of the main emerging issues that are coming out for social housing is around affordability. Affordability has been accredited to blah, blah, blah statistics in 2024 of so many people being homeless. The following was also identified, ... So 2 sentences I've used, and then you can bring it down. So you put the person in the picture, and then you can follow it up with more bang, 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 good, great statistics, information. But don't just have one word on a dot point. So if it's around, just say rental prices. Rental prices in the community rising constantly, causing pressures for families, not rising rental costs. Give an area of what it's affecting as well. How you will continue to keep up to date with developments and how you ensure you review the developments. They're going to be a little bit shorter for sure. Make sure that you have a reference list here. And that could be, and I'm happy for you just to copy the search engine URL and put that in. Doesn't have to be in an APA style reference list, as long as you're making sure that you have each reference there. But it would also be good. So if you've used the Australian government for the ABS, make sure you've got the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, and then you've got the link. Beyond Blue, and then you've got the link. Infograph on housing requirements in Lower East Victoria, and the link. Yeah, that sort of thing. Make sure that you're making sure that is easy to see where you've gone, because sometimes the links have all these different numbers and words in it. You wouldn't know what they are. All right, so let's have a look at frequently asked questions. And like I was just saying, if you don't know how to reference, do it in that style so it's still professional writing. You've given the link and shown where you've researched. That's what's important for us to see, where you've been to find that research and what you got out of that. How do you make meaning out of that? If you need task support to help break down the tasks, your assessments, don't forget the LSO at haiderinstitute.edu.au. We have the learning support officers who are going to break that down. And I think very shortly they're looking at study groups coming on board as well. Quite a few people last week had trouble uploading documents into the Accelerate portal for assessments. If you're doing that, give Haida a call or email quickly and ask, could the documents be uploaded if you've tried everything, or for my class, you can access me and I can upload that if that's an issue. Talking about that task 2 assessment, because for you to submit your work, if you want to do it on a Word doc and submit it separately, which is possible to do, but each section there already in your task. You won't be able to submit unless you put something in each section. So I would suggest just using it in the task itself. And can I get a deferral, a timeout from studies due to change in somebody's circumstances? Now, this time of year, lots of things happen for people, and it's a culmination of 9 to 10 months of a very busy year, and many things are coming up to causing blockages to study flow. And if you do, you can email the learning support officers and ask for a deferral. That's where you can put your studies on hold for a certain amount of time. And then that stops all the backlog of all the past assessments logging up again for you to complete when you get back. If you don't notify anybody and that time goes past and you get towards the end of your course and you need extra time, you also need to do an application for extra time on that. So is there any other frequently asked questions that you think that you might be able to add in here? No, it's all good. Angie?
Fine. I've got a question. Sorry, I'm late. I've got a crisis I have to deal with. I've got a question. In the last unit, it says through, I think it's one of three, I can't remember. Anyway, with the video, I was a bit confused. So do we actually have to book an appointment with one of the trainer, or are we doing this play role with someone else?
It's actually not a play role. It's this is presenting your reflective piece.
Yeah, wrong choice
Yes.
of word. My apologies.
That's all right. I'll just go and grab that and I'll bring it up to share. Yeah, another good question there. Because the way it's presented, you go, what do they want me to do here? Right. So I'm just going through the file. Bring that up. All right. Share my screen. All righty, so this is the one where you're doing your development plan. So, overview of instructions. Participate in a role play. You play the role of a community services worker who is taking part in an annual employee performance review. Oh, there you go, Angie, with your team leader, manager, played via a pre-recorded video. The role play will focus on your personal development for the past 12 months. So, in saying that, choosing an area of practice, so you've got these things to follow. You speak clearly, confidently, in appropriate volume, maintain appropriate eye contact with the team leader manager, ensuring your timing is appropriate. Now, it says up here, played via the pre-recorded video. So that looks like you are responding to the pre-recorded video. To make it easier for you, if you want to, you can have another person that you're talking to. But that pre-recorded video will have questions in it from the supervisor. So if you had somebody saying those questions, I'd be happy with you with your role play in that too. But what it wants you to is present as if that person's asking you questions. Tricky. All right, let me go back to it again. Right, let's see what else it tells us in here. That's it. Right. So here's what it says. You should demonstrate the appropriate skills. Ensure you speak clearly, maintain eye contact, ensure your timing is appropriate. Don't speak too quickly or slowly. So then I would be thinking that you are watching this video and responding to it. So let's have a quick look. It's only 3 minutes.
So good afternoon. Thank you for coming back in to have a little quick meeting with me today. We did catch up last week to talk over your role as a mental health support worker and your key performance indicators and things like that. But today we're having a little quick chat about your annual employee performance review. And part of that is your personal development plan for the year. So that's what I would like you to work on this week. Putting together your personal development plan for your position as a mental health support worker here with us. So part of this plan, I would like you to think about 3 professional SMART goals. Now, we did have a discussion a few weeks ago. It was somebody came in to talk to us all here in this organisation about SMART goals and what they are and how we create them and how we work towards them. So I'd like you to think about 3 professional SMART goals. 2 of them will look at professional practice and how you can, you know, stay current and stay up to date with those things. And the other one I would like you to look at would be any professional development for yourself in your role. So think about things that you might want to undertake, such as training or seminars, chances to network, etc., and come up with a plan, how, where, you know, how you're going to achieve this, and let me know on that plan. Also, I'd please like you to have a think about formal ways of learning. So whether that's through
I'm just going to stop it there and we'll just run it forward a little bit further.
the different ways that you're going to learn, formally and informally. And I'd also like you to explain to me how you will measure and record your progress. So one of the things I'd like to do is have a 3 monthly check-in with you over the 12 months, just to monitor your progress, see how you're going, if you need any support, and things like that. So I'll leave that up to you to create a meeting with me. It doesn't have to be long, maybe 15 minutes. And we can just have a check-in. So if that's okay with you, I would like you, like I said earlier, just to work on this plan this week, your professional development plan, and make sure you include all of those things. And then you can just email it through to me or pop it on my desk, whatever's easier. And
so their requirements are you're responding to what your supervisor has asked you to do. Now, how you want to present that could be just simply that you're talking, hi, you know, hi, Miss Jones, further to our meeting next week, I have put together my development plan and my plan is as follows. Smart trick, use a PowerPoint if you want to. And bring up just some headings that you can then talk to. Yep.
So the question is where I'm getting confused. If you go to after the video, the next part of it, there's a table explaining what she's saying to complete. So where it's getting tricky, so if I complete the table, do I repeat what's from the table? Because that's exactly what she's asking me in the video.
Yes, yes.
So do I repeat what's on the table? which
Yes, yeah.
to me doesn't make sense, because why am I repeating myself on a video when it's written, when I've already completed the table? That's where I'm getting confused. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right, so let's have a look at that. You've got your recording in there. Personal development plan. This is your plan. These are your goals. And yes, this is what you're talking to. But because here, and you would only have, you know, a couple of words in each one. You know, you have small areas. How will I know when I've achieved them? Measurement. I've gained a certificate in Cert IV in mental health. Goal 2, I've been able to accomplish getting a new role in an organization. But when you're talking to it, that will be where you'll extend the conversation. In goal,
Okay,
I wanted to achieve blah, 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 then talk to it.
okay, I understand. So you will just submit like the basic part in that part, and then you, because I don't really want to say it. I've actually completed it, and ages ago, and it's sitting there. But now that's where I got stuck. Where do I think? But I think I get it now. So because it's the margin is so small, you put just the basic, and then when you're speaking, you get a peer, and then you speak
Yeah.
from that. Oh my gosh, sorry, that
Yeah.
took a whole 10 minutes.
So then it'd be, you know, like, look, she said to drop it in the email. So here's my file. I'm dropping it in the emails. Here's my plan. Next week when I meet with you, now tell me about your plan. I noticed that you've got some goals there, and goal 1 is about this. Tell me about that. That's what you're doing.
Thank you.
That's all right. But that is tricky the way it looks, the way it's worded. Yeah. So yes, but it's not a doubling up, because you would have to make the plan before you can speak to it. So think of it that way. But I've seen it done as a PowerPoint. And they've used just a couple of headings on each page. One of them has how do you know you're going to achieve? And all they had the word splashed across the screen was success. So then they talk, I'll know when I'm successful, when I have done and achieved blah, 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 blah. But it was just simply done to show a bit of flow, but more as a visual. But all they're asking you is to visually yourself present. So don't feel you have to do a PowerPoint. If you've got a chart or a diary, that's the other thing I've seen. Somebody actually held up, they made their own calendar where they had their year of achievements, and they actually held it up and talked to that. You know, so if you have a diary or something that you have entries on it, or
I've developed because you know I'm good at these developing documents. So I've done a document where I've done the goals and then I've set it aside. But like I said, like it's that much on the document that I wasn't sure how to incorporate it into the other the smaller space. But now it makes sense. But it's easy. You can go on Word and just develop the document anyway. You just add tables and then just add it. That's it. I'm just saying for everyone else, it's not hard if you just go and add the tables in and just make it up similar to what's in there, just copy the same style.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
they want
thank
to
you.
make sure that you're using the right tools to do that, like your SMART goals and things like that, on how is it achievable? So this is the biggest thing that we've had to sort of look at for people, is that they're unrealistic expectations of themselves over, if they're like the recording said, every 3 months we're going to check in your progress. So if you did 3 months over a year, there's 4 check-ins. What are you progressing and gaining by 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? And make that your focus span. Or you can have a 6-month goal that you might have all short-term and long-term goals within a 6-month framework, because you might want to be coming up to an end of a contract with a job and want something different. So then what are you going to put into place? So think about that. But do have something that you can achieve realistically, not just hypothetically. That's where people fell down around these unrealistic ideas of what they were going to retrain in or do within a 12-month time frame, because they thought they wanted us to see them do all these amazing things. But yes, good question, Ange. All righty. Is there any other questions we'd like to go over? Look, I wish everybody a good learning week this week. And don't forget lso@hayderinstitute.edu.au if you want to ask any questions. And stay safe. And Dwayne will be in next week doing CHCPRP003. It's around communications. And that'll be for 3 weeks. Over that time, I'm doing role plays on Monday nights. So if anybody wants to do role plays with that, you need somebody to do it with, a trainer, I'll be doing that at that time up till 8 o'clock. In that time frame from 5 till 8. So you can let me know if you want to do a role play and we can book that in, Lisa.
So do we just email you and ask, or?
Look, you can send it to LSO, but because it's going to be me doing it, you can let me know. It's all right.
Okay, thank you.
Right, as long as it only needs one person, because that'll be me. If you need 2 or 3 people, then you'll have to go on the list if you need others. Other than for COM002, I think we need 4 people. So hopefully once we start the class and Dwayne explains what the assessment is, maybe on week 2 or 3, that night, you can be in doing the role play with me in your group. So we can utilize that space as well. Jump out of class, come on over, do the role play. So think about that in your planning, because you'll need 4 people altogether. If you organize with yourselves and reach out to your peers to do that assessment with in the first week, and I'll let Dwayne know that he can bring that up in class on the first week. So then by the 3rd week, you could be in doing those. Jump over and do your task 4 and 3, I think it is, and get it done as a team, as a group. Okay. All righty. Take care. And I'll see you in role play land.
Thanks,
And then I'll
Helen,
be-
because I've finished my actual lessons now. So thank you for teaching.
Lovely having you here. I think you can still ask for access, I think, if you want that. Other than that, making sure that you still reach out to LSO and get the support to get those assessment tasks through.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely to have you here, and thank you for all your input and the knowledge that you've shared from lived experiences as well. It helped us see a whole another side from different perspective on what we can just give in theory. So I'm bringing up those tricky questions that I wasn't sure about half the time, but it gave us insight into going, okay, this is the things we need to know for the people we're going to work with. So this is where peer learning is so beneficial, not just for you, but for the trainers as well. So thank you, and everybody have a safe week.
Thank you, Helen.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.